All right, 5, 4, 3, 2. And we should be live for the Steelers Depot live stream here on Monday, March 15th. Glad to be back with you guys. A lot to talk about today. Of course, the first day of legal tampering in free agency. So much to discuss in the Cam Sutton re-signing and where other Steelers players may be going or potentially returning, and already have 31 people here in the chat. So glad you guys are hanging out with Dave and I for about the next hour. Dave, how you doing?
Doing good. Busy, busy, busy.
Yep, very, very busy day. Just off the top here, really quickly, Dave, what are your initial thoughts on the re-signing of Cam Sutton?
Look, I mean, we talked about that's probably one of the guys. I mean, it's going to be difficult if they let both those guys walk out the door, meaning Mike Hilton and Cameron Sutton. And I mean, the likelihood that Mike Hilton was going to be, definitely walking out the door was obviously high because of his market value. Cameron Sutton, if they were going to retain either of the two, he was probably going to be the guy. It's just a hard time just kind of getting his market value. Now, I wrote back right after the end of the season there when I did my restricted free agent primers and all like that.
Mm-hmm.
I put down there, somewhere around $4 million a year. And it looks like that's what he's come in at, which is $4.5 million a year. We don't know the full exact breakdown, but I mean, it's not hard to do the math, right? 2
Right.
years, $9 million. You have to figure that this team's going to want his 2021 cap charge to be $3 million or less. Once again, we don't know the full details. I would imagine it looks something like a $4 million signing bonus, a $1 million base salary in 2021, and what would that make it? Five million in 2022 base salary. That should put his cap number right around $3 million. Now, obviously, you could play with those numbers and all, but I mean that would give him $5 million in his pocket in 2021, and on a deal that totals $9.5 million, you would expect it to be a little bit heavy in that first year on a 2-year deal like that. So, I think this is one of those deals that they absolutely had to get done
Yep.
here, and he signed, sealed, and delivered. And I know there's some rumblings out there. Well, maybe they'll be able to get Mike. I'll be shocked if they get Mike Hilton done. I really do. I think they've kind of covered their bases here with Mike Hilton. So we'll just wait for the final numbers. We'll have them either tonight or in a couple of days.
Yeah, I always saw this as an either or with Cam Sutton, Mike Hilton. One of those guys was going to stay, one of those was going to go, and Sutton was the significantly more likely option to stay because he was cheaper. And so I don't expect Hilton to come back. We'll see. Things can surprise. We'll see what the market's like for Mike Hilton, but by all reports, the market's fairly positive for him. And you just see the deals. The guys like Ronald Darby and Mike Davis just got paid, and Hilton should do pretty well in free agency. So just a reminder, you guys
they don't have hardly any cap space to work
that's
with.
also true.
I mean, if you figure that if the Cameron Sutton number comes in at $3 million, if you use the displacement and take 6.64 or 660,000 away from that after displacement, you get what $2.34 million in cap space. They probably used or a little less, depending on what the split of this 2-year deal is here. But even if they use 2.34, they only had closer to a little under 5 million going into today. So I mean that leaves you around $2.5 million in salary cap space, barring, and I checked the NFLPA site this morning. There was no restructures or anything like that it hit, and obviously no contract terminations yet either.
Yeah, still nothing on Vince, nothing on Tuitt. We'll wait, but I'm surprised nothing has happened in either of those camps to clear additional cap space, but we'll keep an eye on it going forward. Just a reminder, again, Dave and I here for about another hour or so. You can send questions in the chat. Dave and I will get to as many as possible. If you want your question to be guaranteed to be asked and answered by both of us, you can send us a super chat, and that'll get you to the front of the line and get your question guaranteed to be asked, like Mike Odessa, who asked a cap clarification question. This is in your wheelhouse, Dave. He says, I apologize if this is a dumb question, but does a team need to be cap compliant by end of every day, i.e. Steelers sign Bud and Juju today, and that puts them way over the cap. Would the Steelers have to make cap-clearing moves before they can make signings like that, or could they be over till the end of the day? How does that work? So how does that work is Mike's question.
Well, technically, the start of the new league year is March 17th at 4 o'clock. So that's when you have to be under. So they could, they could obviously go over today because the start of the new league year hasn't started yet. But by the time you better get those things processed, everything that you need done, processed through the NFLPA and site and all like that, and filed to make sure that you're under the cap. So 4 o'clock Eastern time on the 17th. Why the heck they have this tampering? I've never quite.
It's all a little silly.
I've never quite understood it, myself. I mean, heck, it's like the New Year's. Hey, it's Christmas for me. I realize the Steelers don't do anything hardly much of worth talking about this time of year. But me and my love of the cap and the contracts and just seeing some of these deals come across and all, that it's Christmas to me. But the official answer to the question is the start of the new league year, which is on the 17th at 4 p.m. Eastern time. That's when all teams have to be under the cap.
Got it. Yeah, well, tomorrow we'll have to talk about it more on the Terrible Podcast, but I really want to get your reaction to some of these deals we're seeing on day one of the legal tampering period and just get your reaction to how things are being set up contractually. John Pennington says, Dave and Alex, here is one for you guys. The Steelers draft Ian Book, quarterback from Notre Dame in the 4th round to put pressure on Rudolph and Haskins. I'm all for putting pressure on Haskins. I don't think he should be waltzing into any sort of job right now. Not a big Ian Book fan. I haven't studied him super in depth, but just watching Lee Meikenberg and just some Notre Dame on TV. I think he's a kind of a gamer winner at Notre Dame, but I don't see that translating incredibly well to the NFL.
Yeah, I don't have a problem you get him 6th, 7th round or undrafted or something like that. But I personally, and the only reason I know a little bit about that kid is because of contextualizing all that stuff from Chase Claypool, right? And the arm strength's not there. I don't think, and I realize he was one of the ones at the Senior Bowl, right? As well too. I'm not seeing it with him, and I'm definitely not seeing it in as far as 4th round talent goes along those lines. Now, if you get in the 6th or 7th round or undrafted and all, that's where I think he is. But that late, my view on quarterbacks, which I think everybody's pretty well aware of at this point in time, if they're going to draft one at all, they should draft one in the 1st round and get a guy that they like. If they don't, why bother?
Yep.
Because they're probably going to get a lot of compensatory draft picks this year anyway. Give them a little ammunition if they need to move up next year. Maybe if there's a guy that they like. But I don't see the need when you got Haskins and you want to try to see what you have with him. You obviously have Mason Rudolph under contract for 2021, and then go from there. So not a big Ian Book fan myself.
Yeah, I'm with you. I like what F. War says. Book has moxie. That's about it. I think that's a good way to frame up Ian Book's game. Got a super chat just came in from Rich. Appreciate the super chat. $5 says, what's this market saying about free agents as a whole? Seems to be the same, huh? Yeah, I mean, you're still seeing guys get a lot of money. I think we're seeing more incentives and potential voidable year deals and teams being very creative about how they attack the first year of the contracts, which they generally always do, but maybe even more so this year. But it's free agency, and if you want to play on day one, you got to pay.
It's what I kind of have outlined, I think, right, Alex? The top of the top still probably going to get paid here. And it looks, look at some of these edge rushers, man.
Yeah, what's Dupree going to get?
Bud's got to be a pretty happy man seeing kind of this right now, especially with a couple of those guys re-signing with their own teams and never got a chance to hit free agency. Check back with us on Rich on the wide receiver market, because really we don't have a lot of movement there. I think we got some bottom end guys. I'm not surprised Nelson Aguilar. In fact, at first I was a little bit, he got $13 million, but it ends up, I think there's some incentives in there. I think essentially it's like $11 million per year for Nelson Aguilar. But if Nelson Aguilar gets $11 million, and what did he catch last year, Alex? A little bit less than 50 passes, I think, or something along those lines.
48.
800 something yards. I think he had like 8 touchdowns along those lines. What does that tell you about guys like Kenny Golladay and Juju Smith-Schuster? my thought all along is Juju's going to be right there in that 16 to 17.5 million dollar range, and anything less than that, I consider that kind of a little bit of a discount on his end. And we'll see. I think you're going to have the top 2 or 3 guys get the money there when it comes to wide receiver, and then the other guys are going to turn in kind of Nelson Aguilar, maybe type contracts there, maybe a little bit more than that and all. But so far, and look, it's just a small sample size right now, right? But I think we're seeing the top of the market get the top of the market. So I'm not really floored, really.
Yeah, my overall assessment, and there's so much information pouring in, it's hard to really take a step back and look at it all, but we're seeing a lot of guys stay with their teams, maybe take some shorter deals, and that's, I think, influencing the market for the top-end guys. You're seeing, as you said, some of the edge rushers stay, Okora with Detroit and Shaq Barrett in Tampa Bay. That's going to push up the price of guys like Bud Dupree. Some of these receivers who got franchise tag, Allen Robinson, Chris Godwin, that's going to push up the price of some of the receivers like Nelson Aguilar and eventually, guys like Juju Smith-Schuster and Kenny Galladay. So, I think a lot of guys are just staying at home, taking some shorter deals, and maybe playing for a year or two from now. But I think it is, generally speaking, typical day one of free agency. Shoes, Guns, Cars, Gaming 0112 says, Dave, if you don't agree with drafting running backs in the first round when you draft one, when do you draft one is what he's asking, and because you don't like drafting any late either. So that's his question. What is your response to that?
Look, you know how I feel about it. I just think because of the whole fifth-year option and all like that, because the position is just so fungible. And if you just even look back at the last few several running backs over the last, I guess, the 5 years drafted in like the first round, and look at the amount of games that they missed and how many of these guys actually end up making it to their second contracts and all. I was on board a few years ago when they drafted Le'Veon Bell in the second round. I'm fine with them drafting a running back this year. Because I think it's evident that they are. I'm a little bit aggravated though that here we are. This will make the 4th year in a row they've drafted a running back, and everybody else can get fungibility out of it except for the Steelers, right?
Right.
I understand why they are. I just personally don't like it because I just think it is such a fungible position. So, do I think they're going to draft one this year? Look, I at this point now, I don't think anybody can deny that they're going to end up with either one of probably Najee Harris, Javonte Williams, or Travis Etienne.
Right.
I think that's a given at this point. It's just, where do you get those guys? You got to get one of them in the first round, or you got to get one of them going to drop down to 55 to you. And I think the odds are good that one of those guys drops down to 55 if the Steelers waited there. I just have a hard time imagining all 3 of those guys going in the top 54 picks. So, look, it's just from more of an analytical, statistical standpoint, that I'm just not a fan, because normally, look, the Steelers like to get these first-round draft picks of theirs 2 second contracts, because that's the value of obviously of a first-round draft pick on top of it. I just don't like the chances of that happening with the first-round running back. History tells you that it's not a good investment anyway if you do get that player to a second contract
Right.
at the running back position.
Right. Understood. Good answer. James Naylor says, I am the only one who finds it unusual that Kevin Colbert keeps signing deals through next year's draft. Would the next GM really want to take, and it was a super chat that just came in, so I lost my place, but the question was, would the next GM really want to take over right after any given draft? I get that point, James, and I suspect that when Colbert retires, which I have a feeling this will be his final year, it'll be after the season. Contractually, it runs through the draft because that's just how the contracts are set up. But he actually wouldn't step aside after the draft, and a new GM wouldn't come in May. That's my guess of the situation.
Yeah, look, how old is he now? 60?
Mid-late 60s, 65.
Yeah, and he's obviously been there since 2000.
Right.
And look back at those old pictures; he had hair. Look like a young man back then. Now he obviously don't. So, yeah, look, I think and we've said it for a little while. You would think that at the very least, Colbert and Ben Roethlisberger are tied tied to the hip, and I think at this point it's pretty obvious that barring really something unforeseen, this is going to be it for Ben Roethlisberger. At least with the Steelers in this coming season, it would make sense that it's a jumping off point for Kevin Colbert as well too. But I mean, stranger things have happened. I mean, I think Kevin Colbert has a better chance of returning in 2022 than Ben Roethlisberger does.
Yeah.
At this point, but it's one of those things. He's kind of said now for a couple of years now he's going to take it year for year by year, and that's exactly what he's doing.
Yeah, I think the reason why you see the contract through the draft, because you couldn't have it up in February or something. Because let's say you go to a Super Bowl and you do want to come back, you're not trying to negotiate your contract because you're potentially in a Super Bowl type run. So I think that's why it's set up there as the draft as the endpoint. But by no means are they beholden to that, and I don't think they would be whenever Colbert does retire. Got a really generous super chat here from Chad Weiss, longtime Depot commenter, says, appreciate you guys and the whole Depot crew. We appreciate you, Chad, and you interacting with the readers and us and sharing some great draft insights. So thank you very much for that super chat. Got a question here, said several times, so I'll indulge it here from Bro High. Says, do you think we should draft Kellen Mond on day 2 or 3? I like Mond more than some of the other tier 2 quarterbacks, more so than, say, Jamie Newman had a decent week at the Senior Bowl. But I'm with Dave. I'm a go big or go home guy when it comes to quarterbacks. If I don't draft somebody in the first round, unless I think there's somebody that truly is a diamond in the rough, I'm not going to address the position. And I don't think Mond is that diamond in the rough.
Same.
Yeah, so there's your answer there, Bro High. Let me scroll back up here to the chat. 150 people in the chat. Thank you guys so much. A crazy, crazy first day of free agency, and the Steelers haven't done a whole lot, and there's going to be a whole lot more news coming in. And
y'all really like Alex a lot.
No, I like both of us. It's a good tag team here. Steel Pastor says, if you could only have 2 of 3, would it be Hayden and Cam Sutton or Sutton and Hilton? It says Tim Sutton. I'm trying to figure out the question here. I'm happy with what they have. I think in an ideal world, would you rather have Sutton and Hilton than Hayden and the other? Probably for the longer term benefit. But my goal and hope for the team was going to be to just not lose both Hilton and Sutton. If you do that, that's devastating. Who do you replace both of those guys with? You got slot concerns, you got dimebacker concerns. You at least keep Cam Sutton. So to me, that's mission accomplished.
Yeah, and I look at it more of because I know what the cap situation is, and I know what the market value is here. I think you take the signing of Cameron Sutton and you run real quick. Because I really don't think Joe Hayden's going anywhere. Once again, look, he's only scheduled to make what do we say he's going to make $7 million in this year. That's not a lot. I mean, and I think he's got $7 million worth of play in him. Now, I would kind of question if we got into, if they did extend him and they weren't fake years or whatnot. And then here we are a year from now talking about Joe Hayden still being, the starting cornerback. And, I'd kind of raise my eyebrows at that point. But really, long story short, I look at it more of, less hypothetical more than I do what was the most realistic thing to kind of happen here and the most doable thing. And I think that one thing has happened. Look, God bless Mike Hilton. I wish they could get him back, but that dude deserves to get paid, man.
Absolutely.
And who knows? Maybe 2 years somewhere. Maybe he comes back on a cheap deal or something to end his career in Pittsburgh or something along those lines. I don't know, but I'm rooting for Mike Hilton to get paid this offseason, and I think he will. And I've been kind of resigned to the fact that he won't be in Pittsburgh this year. Look, if they get something done with him, I'll be floored, but it'll be a great problem to have. I just don't think it's going to go that route.
Yeah, I'm with it. Just some quick free agency news, scrolling through my my Twitter timeline, some of the alerts I'm getting. Jaguars very active the last couple of hours, signing Philip Dorsett, Carlos Hyde, Rayshawn Jenkins. So Urban Meyer trying to load up here. You guys see on screen my 2021 mock offseason. Got a lot of good reviews and a lot of praise, a lot of criticism too, which is very fair because I didn't love what I did this year, but you guys should check that out over on Steelers Depot. Have a question here from Steve Brooks who says, who gets Hilton snaps, Cam and ... Well, Cam Sutton's going to be your starting slot corner in 2021. I'm 100% positive on that. From there on out, and who's going to be your dime guy, I think it's kind of up in the air right now in terms of in-house options. Antoine Brooks might be your next man up, kind of that slot backer type role. Played a little bit last year when injury struck. Second-year guy, hopefully a good jump for him after that just chaotic rookie year of the pandemic and no off-season program, no preseason games, etc. Other than that, they're going to have to add somebody, whether that's through draft or some low-level free agent type guy. I'm not sure, but there aren't a lot of great in-house replacements right now to replace both, Hilton leaving and then Sutton ascending to a full-time nickel role.
You would think that if they address the cornerback position in this draft, probably going to be a slot type player, right?
You would think. But you got to consider Hayden last year of his deal. Nelson currently, expiring contract. Justin Layton hasn't impressed, so I think slot's more likely, but it could go either way.
And I think they like James Pierre. Obviously, It's unfortunate we don't know a lot about him. I think who was it? Owen or Tyler Wise, one of the two broke him down. Whatever amount of snaps he played late in the season, and there, there's obviously some good there, but in no way, shape, or form can you draw any hard conclusions from. What did he play? 9 snaps, 19 snaps, something like that.
Yeah, he surpassed Lane by the end of the year. I think they like Pierre more than like Justin Lane right now. So if there's going to be a guy to replace a Joe Hayden, unless Cam Sutton kicks outside, it's James Pierre.
Obviously you'd like to get that Uber. You'd like to get that Cameron Sutton type, maybe. The guy that can play inside, outside, smart, knows every position on the field kind of player there. But I think that might be asking a little bit much, especially when you get into 4th, 5th round, probably rounds where they're probably more likely to get one of those. So it could go either way, but I would think probably they would lean towards slot right now.
Gage and Duck are asking questions about a potential Le'Veon Bell reunion and if I would like him back as the receiving back. I think the skills would diminish so much it's not worth the distraction and drama and storyline on Le'Veon Bell. I'd rather bring in a Theo Riddick or Chris Thompson or somebody like that I think would do better in that receiving role and wouldn't have the storyline and the headline of Le'Veon Bell coming back to Pittsburgh. I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, no thank you.
Yeah.
They have that T-shirt already.
Yeah, it's not worth much right now. Let's see. All Sports All the Time says Bud is about to get paid. I think you're right, my dude. Frank K says Bud will get a minimum of $15 to $20 million per season. And Alvaro Ortego says expected contract for Dupree more than Barrett. You think Bud Dupree gets more than Barrett's? What was that? $17 million before incentives per year for Shaq Barrett?
I have to look. I haven't seen everything about that deal, but I would think it's going to be right there in line. There's still him coming off this knee injury involved. If he wasn't that, we're talking about 18.5 to 20 million for Bud. No problem here. Is there a hurry? Is there maybe a wink or a nod out there right now too? It's going to be interesting to see the timeline on this. If teams are truly, because evidently, he's posting these videos and there's reports that his rehab's going good, but it's only been since December though, right? So we're talking about January, February, March, where he's probably right around a little more than 3 months removed from surgery. That's not a lot,
No.
Will teams maybe wait a little bit on him? And the bad thing about it is if they do, obviously I hope he gets paid tomorrow and I hope he gets the 18 million because that helps the Steelers in compensatory draft pick value here. But what happens if we're getting closer up to that time where the cutoff is, where the compensatory pick time is here?
Right.
Is that a possibility? And that would be my only fear. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm just saying that, if we get like past March 17th and Bud's not signed, maybe that's time to start worrying. you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
But what's his market value now? I've kind of said all along that injury and all, I've thought it's at least. I thought that at least if he took a 1-year deal, it would be 10 million if he had to settle for a one year deal. But if he's able to find a team willing to pay him multi years, there's no way he's going to lock himself up for no 10 million a year. No. So that would have to be in that 15 to 18 million dollar range, somewhere around in there. So now we just, before you go to bed tonight, everybody pray that Bud Dupree gets signed, because I don't think you want this thing lasting past March 17th, because if it does, maybe that's a sign that some teams out there are wanting to wait a little bit longer until he gets a little bit further along in his rehab.
And Ian Rappaport had some good news for Steelers fans, at least in that regard, reporting, nothing guaranteed, but that Bud Dupree has a strong market right now. So I think his deal, whenever it gets done, will be very comparable to what Shaq Barrett got. Maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. less, maybe just about the same. But in that Shaq Barrett range is where I expect Dupree to come in. I think he won't have to settle for the 1 year deal. I think he'll get the mega multi-year contract.
I'm going to go out on a limb like I did a couple weeks ago when John Clayton said that Bud Dupree's going to have to settle for $6 million a year. I'm going to go, I called that BS in that post pretty much when I wrote it up there. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Bud Dupree gets more than $6 million per year.
Strong take. You heard it first from Dave Bryan. Got a good question here from Mark Leslie. I don't know if I have a great answer to it, so I'll kick it to you first, Dave. Juju inevitably leaving and breaking my heart. Who was the one player that has hurt you personally the most that left the Steelers? What player for leaving really hurt you, Dave?
I still have bad dreams seeing Franco Harris in the Seattle Seahawks jersey, man.
Cringing right now.
Yeah, that's being forced to sit through a New Kids on the Block concert or something like that. Alex's favorite band, but
got all their records. I don't know.
No, Franco, it drove me nuts to see kind of one of your childhood, idols, stars of the set, dynasty Steelers get photographed in a Seattle Seahawks jersey. So that one hurt bad.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a good answer. I mean, there's some of those Mike Webster in Kansas City. That one's always going to be weird too, like Franco. Man, that's a really good question. It was weird seeing James Harrison in a Bengals uniform too, and then a Patriots uniform. That one was just a bizarre situation. Some of that is Harrison's own doing, kind of forcing his way out to go to New England. But that one to me was weird. Going up, watching James Harrison, that great duo, and then seeing him play for the Bengals, no less, just was hard to wrap my head around.
Rod Woodson in a Ravens jersey won't bring you warm and fuzzies either,
Yeah, that's a great one too. I'd love to know your
guys.
guys.
Lake in a Jaguars uniform.
I barely even remember that. Yeah, that's a good pull for sure. But let us know in the comments what free agent or what Steeler that left that really hurt you, kind of emotionally, the most. A couple more questions here. Rob Peterson, what outside free agent signings do you see the Steelers making, if any? It's not going to be too exciting, I don't think. Maybe a tight end, some sort of blocking guy, maybe an edge, get some depth there because there is literally no backup outside linebackers on this roster right now. But I think it's going to be about trying to re-sign your own, whether that's Matt Fowler, Tyson Alualu, Zach Banner. We'll see who is retained, but that is the game right now, trying to keep your own as opposed to chasing outsiders.
Yeah, all of you in the chat right now, you should have the champagne already uncorked. I mean, congratulations. That's Cameron Sutton. There's your free agency, I think. Look, as far as outside guys go, I mean, everybody should be used to what the MO is at this point. And, you're sitting here, you entered today with a little less than $5 million in salary cap space. You just used up at the minimum, probably 2.25 of it to re-sign Sutton. I mean, unless they start freeing up some money here in the next few days, I think you're going to look at Tyson Alualu. I think you're probably going to Banner, stuff that's not going to move the needle. And as far as outside stuff goes, any Jesse James fans, because maybe he comes back on the minimum. Cheap. Learn how to spell cheap, because that's what it's going to look like if it's anybody from the outside. And look, I know everybody wants another center, and maybe the center market floods a little bit more here. But even if they do go get another veteran center here, it's going to be for $1 million or less. It has to be.
Yeah. I mean, they don't really have a choice. I mean, unless they want to restructure a contract or release Vince, they're really getting close to being up against the cap right now. So I'm with you. Cheap tight end. Jesse James is one of the most logical names. James O'Shaughnessy. I would love to get
my boy Hill. My boy got signed by Detroit.
Who's that?
The Saints tight end that was just cut.
Oh yeah, Josh Hill. Yeah, he's going up with Dan Campbell. Yeah, that would have been a great signing as well. But I'm thinking tight end, edge, just some depth where you don't feel like. I think edge would be a great place to look for Pittsburgh, because the edge class in this draft is really weak. And so I would prefer to go with a veteran option, a number 3 type guy to rotate behind Highsmith and Watt, but we'll see what happens.
I'm going to throw this out there. I don't think it's going to happen, but I mean, there's been, Chase Winovich, he's not doing so good with part of the Bill Belichick system over there. And then they went out and they signed another edge today. Is that a guy that maybe Belichick's ready to part ways with already?
Maybe. I like the idea. For sure. What edge did they sign? I'm losing track of the million guys.
Wasn't it
New England signed.
Judon?
Yeah, Matthew Judon. Yep, you're right. From Baltimore.
And who else do they have over there? Don't I thought they got the I thought the cupboard was pretty. It just crossed my mind
Hmm.
because I thought there was a story towards the end of last year too that Winovich isn't not a big fan of that Patriot way or something along those lines.
Mm.
Some of you in the chat Google that tonight. The Winovich kind of story from I think late this last season. He's got 2 years in now. He's still on his rookie contract. Is that a guy maybe you could pry away from Belichick for a third, fourth round draft
Yeah.
pick? I don't know.
Cobra gonna flip another future fifth for Chase Winovich or for another guy. We'll see. Got some good comments here about free agents that you miss. Someone said Le'Veon Bell. Somebody said Rod Woodson, Kevin Green, Greg Lloyd, Antoine Randall L from Frank K. That's a good one. He came back to Pittsburgh at least for one season in the end. So it's good to hear you guys' responses. 172 people in the chat. Appreciate it so much. I figured today would be pretty popular given the fervor in free agency. And just the last thought on the outside linebackers. How about a former Patriot, Derek Rivers, who was Steelers liked out of Youngstown State back in, what year was that? 2017, I think. And he's now a free agent, or soon to be a
Yeah,
free agent.
I liked a couple of those suggestions you had the
Yeah.
other day. Look, Kelvin Beachum is another guy we talked about too. What's going to happen to him?
Right. I was disappointed though Vince Beagle going back to Miami on a 1-year contract, so cross him off my wish list. All right, back to your guys' questions here. Let me try to scroll up and find some new faces potentially. Let's see. And again, we are here for another half hour till 8 o'clock. Someone asked.
I want full credit if that Winovich comes through.
All right. Yeah. Hey, I'll give it to you. I mean, that would
I
be a
don't
heck
think
of a
it will.
call.
I don't think. It crossed my mind when I saw them sign Judon today, and just kind of thinking back to that story a little bit earlier. I think in the off season there.
Yeah, somebody had asked me, and I can't find who it was or where the question was at, who I like more, though, Javonte Williams or Travis Etienne. I like Javonte Williams more. I think the Steelers might as well. It's a little bit tougher to tell with the new OC in there, but Williams is kind of that. I guess Etienne bulked up for his pro day, but just Williams is a bigger dude overall. I think he runs harder and tougher with more power and still has some big playability, and that's probably more of the mold Pittsburgh's looking for. But Etienne may be a little bit more versatile, obviously more dynamic and better in the open field. So if they want to totally flip the script on what they're looking for at the position, a la the Anthony McFarland pick, maybe that pushes them more towards Etienne.
Man, I've finally gotten around to watching a lot of all three of these running backs now.
Mm-hmm.
And I started obviously Najee Harris was the one I knew the most about heading into draft season, and really a fine back. All three, it's hard to say you'd go wrong on any one of these three, right? I mean, Javonte gives you more. Javonte and Travis Etienne are the more explosive, the more of the home going to give the ability to home run hit. But both those guys too, and Najee on top of good contact balance, man. All three of those guys when it comes to getting gains of 10 yards or more. Now I will say this. Both Williams and Etienne, at least in 2020 in their tape, had to work harder at getting their yards. Najee had a lot of, Najee obviously had the best offensive line of all those, and I think probably the North Carolina line second, and then the Clemson line third in that. Najee really didn't, I think his average on his explosive runs of more than 10 yards, I think his first touch, the first time he was touched on average on however many runs that was almost 10 yards down the field. All right. So, he's obviously not as shifty. Now, if you want to get into pros and cons, Najee's obviously the oldest, right? What is he, 24 or right there, damn at it and all. And obviously Javonte and Travis are a lot younger than him. What flavor do you like? I mean, all three of them are fine backs, but I think I'm slowly starting to see maybe why Najee's kind of slipping down a little bit. It's because just not a big creation guy, not a wiggle guy, and all. Now he can run, he'll power run, he can leap over some people, he can break tackles as the best of them. I'm not downplaying him. I'm just saying now that I've seen all three of these guys, I'm starting to realize why these three are the top of the class. And once again, I think it's going to come down to what exactly you're looking for flavor wise. And I have not looked into pass protection or anything like that. That's one thing I got to get into. But all three of them can catch the ball as well.
Right, yeah, that's a big, obviously critical component. I wasn't as big a fan of ETN. I mean, obviously there's some game-breaking ability. The contact balance is excellent, but I just thought he needed some of those big runways to get going. And when he didn't have that, you really saw his skills diminish. And I don't know if he's quite as complete. A good receiver. I don't think he's quite as good as Harris. And in pass play, there's some questions there. But I just overall thought he needed more of a runway than what Harris or Williams are going to need in the NFL. That was my take anyway. But I don't think there's a terrible choice there, and I think obviously all three are going to be in play for Pittsburgh at number 24 or number 55 if, a Williams or even ETN were to fall. All right, let's see more questions here. Be sure to ask them in the chat and super chat if you want to get to the front of the line. Let's see. Paul Brown says, do you realistically see Jesse James drawing interest for any other team other than the Steelers? Who knows? Potentially, I'm sure somebody would throw a pretty low-level minimum type deal Jesse James's way, but I think Pittsburgh makes as much sense as any place for him to come back to.
I mean, if somebody signs him, it's not going to be. You wouldn't think it'd be much more than the minimum. Could if push comes to shove, could the Steelers do 2 years on him? Would Jesse even want to do 2 years? I don't know. I really think someone like Jesse, who's probably around a 400 or 500 snap player, in this market right now, I think that's his market, and that's the minimum. I think you get him on a deal just like you signed B.J. Finney too, where you I believe he qualifies for a qualifying contract, so that would mean you could pay him also the 137,500 signing bonus. Give him the base salary for his years, which I believe is around 900 something thousand, and then you come away with that with the cap hit of a second year player plus a signing bonus because it's a 1 year qualifying contract. I would think that that's the way that the Steelers are trying. I would think that they've reached out to him at this point, so we'll just have to wait and see here. Maybe Jesse wants to see how the market kind of settles down after March 17th here. But if they do, I won't be surprised. 1 year minimum qualifying contract.
Right, and worth noting, James could sign at any time since he was released. He can sign. Doesn't have to wait till the 17th, and he will not count against the comp formula. Although I bet he probably wouldn't count even if he would have been eligible in the first place. Let's see, I had a question here from Hector Martinez. Says, do the Steelers roll with Chase, Deontay, and James Washington, or do they sign someone in free agency or the draft? And I have an article on this I'll have in a day or two on Juju, and assuming that he's gone, I think it's 98% likely Juju's gone at this point. You have to replace that skill set in the slot, and obviously Chase and Deontay and Washington are all very talented players, but none of them quite have the tough possession option route skill set that Juju has. I mean, Claypool, to an extent, is probably the closest thing to that, but still isn't one-to-one. So I would love to see a slot receiver come in. I've mentioned Willie Steed and Golden Tate, or even a Trent Taylor on a real low level, probably even cheaper option. And then there's some draft guys as well. Daz Newsome from North Carolina, Amari Rodgers from Clemson, Amon-Ra St. Brown from USC, to go back from the old Juju kind of train of thought. Those are some options. But I think you will have to bring somebody in to specifically fill that pretty valued and underappreciated skill set that Juju brought.
I mean, true or false, if Juju walks out that door, the Steelers will draft a wide receiver.
True. 100% true.
Right. So, and then.
But do you sign somebody in free agency too?
You do for the minimum, but that's it. You're gonna want some bodies there to kind of cover you just in case,
Any idea on a who? Because Tate probably wouldn't sign for the minimum. I don't think Steed would either.
Well, then lower your sights.
I mean, you could just say, we got Ray, and we'll just go draft somebody. I mean, you could theoretically do that.
You could. I would think that maybe they'd want at least one more, maybe veteran to at least compete in there. But once again, you're talking about a minimum salary guy. I mean, they're going to draft. I mean, it would be shocking. I mean, only twice during since Kevin Colbert's been in Pittsburgh have they not drafted a wide receiver in a draft. And if they definitely losing one, if they wind up losing Juju, I mean, the odds astronomically go up,
right.
that they would. So, knowing that you're probably going to want that kid to make the roster, you spend a high enough draft pick on him. How many wide receivers you're going to carry? 5, 6, depends on what you classify Ray as. So I think you go out there and get a guy, but it had to be a minimum value guy. It had to be a veteran minimum value guy that could give you something in the slot.
Right. Got a super chat here from Rich Hud. Opinion on Master Teague. That's the running back from Ohio State. He's not in this draft, so I haven't spent much of time paying attention to him. You want to talk about Ohio State running back, you talk about Trey Sermon. Big guy, kind of the classic style of back the Steelers had been drafting. Le'Veon Bell, Benny Snell, James Conner, guys like that. That would be more in line with the older, or the previous model, the way the Steelers have been drafting running back. So couldn't tell you much on Teague, but my focus would be on Trey Sermon. If they do miss out on the top running backs for whatever reason, if you want to look maybe third, fourth round, that's where Trey Sermon could come in. Let's see. I saw one question a moment ago I wanted to get to. Good question here from Simon K. I apologize, I don't know how to pronounce your last name, but he says, as this team prides itself on re-signing their own talent for as long as they can, should it be deemed a failure when we see so many great young players walk this year? I don't think it should be. And let's just see who all they lose and who all gets retained. Obviously, they're going to lose some guys, but let's just see, where things are when the dust settles. Had there not been obviously the pandemic and the cap constriction and things like that, you would have seen probably more of these guys come back, or at least a greater chance for a Mike Hilton to return, maybe even a Bud Dupree, etc. So this year was so weird for so many obvious reasons. So it's hard to hold that against the Steelers too much. And just generally speaking, their overall track record of retaining talent is awfully impressive. So understand the question. It is definitely a very painful offseason for the Steelers. We've been talking about that since last August, Dave, you and I. But I think there's some obvious caveats and explanations for why this year was especially painful.
Oh, yeah, look, I mean, you're talking about $25 million difference in cap space. I covered this on my terrible take not too long ago, right?
Exactly.
People want to get on them and saying they mismanaged the cap and all like that, but I mean, there's they don't have $25 million that they probably and they usually plan this thing out at least 3 years out, right? Probably a little bit into 4 years as well too, when you're planning out what your cap cost and what your cash flow and what your cash expenditures are going to be on top of it there. So you got yourself in a spot where you're expecting the cap to be probably at least 25 million more than what it is now, and for a team that kind of lives in the future, if you will, as the Steelers did. Look, I mean, they got themselves last year because of having to kind of wait until the last minute because of being up against the cap. Remember, all those restructures had to come late because they were waiting for the CBA to get ratified. Because remember the 30% rule that we talked about and all like that, had they gone into an uncapped year there. So all that kind of stuff had to happen late, and they had to clear cap room and that's what happened. And then on top, a byproduct of that was that we're going to get into a year there where not only do we have some can kicking going on, we don't have $25 million in cap space that we thought that we were going to have there. So that plays all together. But I mean, in typical Steelers fashion anyway, what usually happens? They retain 3 or 4 of their, they try to retain usually 2, 3, 4 of their own unrestricted types. They obviously aren't going to be able to restricted tender anybody this year, but they've already re-signed one of their restricted guys to a minimum deal or a near minimum deal in Ray McLeod. We'll see what happens with Ola Daney. I have a feeling Ola comes back on for the minimum after the dust settles. If not, what have you really lost there? And we'll see what happens with guys like Banner and Alualu and some of these other guys that they want to lose. Obviously, Hilton's a big loss. They weren't going to keep Bud healthy or what? Even if they had the extra 25 million, were they going to tag Bud again and work out a long-term deal with him? I think that's kind of doubtful, especially with TJ Watt having being on schedule for a new deal here. So, I mean, kick them if you must, but once again, the thought of not having $25 million when you thought you're going to have that to work with is a huge deal this year.
Yeah, I think that's really key perspective. Speaking of edge, I have a question here from Lance Creed. What free agents could the Steelers target to backfill outside linebacker? Good question. We have our wish list here. I'll pull up for you. Although one name, as I mentioned earlier, Lance, has been re-signed by the Dolphins. That's Vance Beagle to a 1-year contract. Thought he could be cheap coming off a torn Achilles, causing him to miss, I think, all last season. And but he is re-upping with Miami. A couple other names, though, to throw out. I know this will not be Dave's favorite, but Tack McKinley. The Raiders, just because the Steelers did bring him in, showed interest when he was coming out of UCLA. And then I think one that makes a lot of sense, we mentioned earlier, Derek Rivers from the Rams. But yeah, right now at edge, I mean, there's nothing there. So I do think you probably bring Ola back on a 1-year deal because he is a good special teams player, and just to have some semblance of depth right now. I think you just can't go into the draft with just Alex Highsmith and TJ Watt in a really weak edge class overall, Dave.
Right.
That's my mentality and take on the situation. Also, a question or a comment here from, who was it? I can't find it here at the moment. Somebody was asking me, or Andres Ross says, Ike Taylor thinks the Steelers will stay true to who they are and draft an edge in the first round. Would that be a shock? It would to me, unless we're talking about someone like Zaven Collins, who's kind of a Timmons, can play inside out sort of deal. But I don't think the edge class is very strong. It's not the most critical position of need. I think the focus will be on offense and specifically upgrading that run game, whether that's a running back or a center or still maybe an offensive tackle.
Right, and I mean, obviously, we think they're gonna look at center, right? You covered that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the mandate is clear. The focus is clear. Support Ben. The best thing you can do to support Ben is to give him a better run game. And you had the worst running game last year. It was one of the reasons why this offense struggled and was just not sustainable. And their mandate 100% will be to fix that.
Now, outside of that, defense. I mean, we'll see what kind of shape they are. I mean, you would think maybe an edge could be on the draft list, and we'll see what shakes out at inside linebacker here. Obviously, you have Devin Bush coming back, and we'll see what happens with Vince is going to be a key part in this. Probably going to really influence decisions. Poor UG3 can't keep that back healthy right now. You wish you could count on something there. They obviously got Marcus Allen coming back, Robert Spillane coming back. So if Vince sticks, that obviously probably going to lessen the load quite considerably when it comes to the inside linebacker position. But if Vince goes and you're not able to re-sign a guy on the cheap like Avery Williamson or something like that, I think at some point you can see them maybe take an inside linebacker.
Yeah, I think if Vince goes, they probably do draft it at some point. Now, again, maybe Zaven Collins is there at 24 and you love him so much, the grade is so high that that's the position. But I still think the focus overall, push comes to shove, will be at least the focus and the intent on upgrading the offense and that run game. Jason Williams says, Willie Steed or John Brown? I would take Willie Steed. I think it's more of a need thing, and I can draft speed in the draft, but they're different types of guys. John Brown and Steed, the way they win are two very different ways. John Brown's a speed, vertical Z-type guy. Steed is a option route, F slot type of guy.
And plus, Brown's probably not so much better suited to play in the slot.
Right, yeah.
He's more of a Z on the outside.
Couple of cap-related things. Frank V, not happy with the Steelers' managing of the cap, says kicking the can down the road isn't always smart business. I think Omar Khan is overrated. That's why he hasn't become a GM. Well, from reports at least had, the Texans owner not interfered, Khan would have been the GM of the Texans right now, but we'll never know exactly how true that was. And Andre says a question kind of angled towards you, Dave, says, what's a signing bonus and how does it relate to the cap?
Signing bonus is just that. It's a bonus to sign, and how it works out cap-wise there is more along the lines of, with a signing bonus, you can stretch it out, or I don't want to stretch it. You give the player the signing bonus. Generally, the payout is in the year. Now, you can work out the different payment structures of how that is actually paid, but as far as the accounting and the cap purposes go for the cap, that gets accounted and really prorated out the length of the deal up to 5 years. So if a player, one of these players in free agency now is signing a 5-year deal and his signing bonus is $15 million. Well, you divide that 15 by 5 and $3 million goes in each year as a prorated signing bonus charge. And then that's how that gets accounted for each year in there. Obviously, if you have less years, say you signed a guy for like in the case of Cameron Sutton, he signed for 2 years and we think that he got a $4 million signing bonus. Well, $2 million gets accounted for this year. $2 million of that gets accounted in 2022 against the cap. Once again, the most amount of time that you can prorate that signing bonus out is for 5 years. If you have that on the contract to work with. Now, if you only have a player signed to a 2-year contract, or 2 years. You can't, there's no extra years to tack that on to. So it goes by length of contract, and or five years. If you have 5 years to work with, that's the max that you can stretch or prorate out a signing bonus.
Gotcha. Good information there. Trey, going back to receivers, asking, do you think Ray starts at the slot in 3 receiver sets, or do they move Johnson there? They won't move Johnson there. I mean, they do mix and match. They did more of that last year than any year previously. I think in terms of in-house guys, so obviously McLeod, he's a slot guy. I think Chase Claypool would play more in the slot than maybe anybody else in terms of someone moving around, but I do think you'll have to invest with the draft or a free agent to find someone that fills more of that Juju role. But I think Ray and Chase Claypool would be 2 current in-house guys who would see the biggest uptick in slot snaps to replace Juju. All right, let's see any other questions here. Mark Leslie, is there any cap on signing coaching staff? Is there a limit to the amount of coaches a team can have? I don't believe so in terms of the cap or the limit to the number of coaches. Steelers have a relatively smaller coaching staff, but it has expanded a little bit over the last couple of years. And those are basically the bulk of questions. Just to kind of touch on it here really quickly, Dave, any differing thoughts in terms of who's staying and who's going with free agents from where you were 24 hours ago in terms of, do you think someone that you thought was going to return is going to leave or vice versa?
No, I mean the big one is obviously Juju.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my head was telling me that he was going to go, and my gut was telling me that they were going to figure something out with him. I mean, obviously, the further you get into this thing, closer that you get to the real date here, talking about the start of free agency here. If he's not signed, it don't look good, right?
Right. And I'm guessing you probably just saw this day, but Corey Davis to the Jets, 3 years, $37.5 million, $27
I guess that's
million
one
guaranteed.
place where Juju's not going, huh?
Yeah, and the Jets were rumored to have interest. I don't know how true that ever was, but if there was a team that could throw a lot of money, Juju's way, it was going to be the Jets. But it sounds like Corey Davis is going there instead. I guess theoretically the Jets could sign both. Who knows? The Patriots are signing every receiver on the market, but Corey Davis to the Jets, and that's about 12 point something per year for Corey Davis.
What's the number?
3 years, $37.5 million, according to Adam Schefter. So that's 12 and change per year for Corey Davis. So Aguilar gets 11, Davis gets 12.5, we'll call it, and Juju should come in above that. Still, I think he beats out Corey Davis and Nelson Aguilar.
Yeah, at least once again, at least we know he's not going to the Jets at this point, or we wouldn't think he would be. That obviously a lot of people were trying to peg him there, I think, because of Sam Darnold and all like that. But 3 years, 30. What's 37.5 divided by 3?
I don't have the calculator right. Well, I can use it on my phone, I guess.
12
point something.
12.5. That's low,
Yeah, I thought it'd be a little bit higher for him.
I thought that'd be a little bit higher for him too, but you would still think Juju's going to top that number, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see.
Someone was kind of surprised, I think Trey was, about Claypool in the slot, but he played in the slot a good bit. Think about the Eagles game, that last touchdown he had, that came over the slot. And so he played there. Not that he's a conventional slot receiver, but Juju wasn't either.
He did a lot. He did it quite a bit at Notre Dame now. So,
yeah.
That's what I'm kind of looking for here.
Right. Again, the skill set is different. The way you use Juju can't be the way and wouldn't be the way you use Claypool, but you could just still play in that slot just to soak up some snaps there. I have James Washington on the outside as the Z, Johnson as the X. That's one way of looking at things. Jesse's asking about Will Fuller from the Texans. What do you think about the Steelers taking a look at him? I don't see it. Fuller wants to take a 1-year deal, and the Steelers will not be able to afford that because of their cap situation. Plus, he's suspended for the first month of 2021. I think maybe he's got 1 game left on the suspension, I should say. But still, I don't see him being on Pittsburgh's radar because he wants a 1-year contract, and there's no way to move that money if you're Pittsburgh, who's still pretty close to the cap.
Right.
Let's see. Jason Williams saying the Notre Dame linebacker, that's JOK or Najee Harris. Who are you taking? I understand, again, it's like Zaven Collins, super athletic guy. Talking about the Notre Dame kid. I think Pittsburgh, though, would take Najee Harris. Who would I take? I'm not 100% sure, but I think Pittsburgh would be in the mindset of taking Najee Harris.
Yeah, I don't like I said, I think it's gonna be one of 3. I think one of those 3 are gonna end up being with the Steelers. I've gone through the explosive plays. I'm starting to go through the targets now. And after that, I'm going to look at the pass protection. So, I mean, that's quite a lot to look at right now. But I just tell you, just from an explosive play, I mean, standpoint with these guys, all three of them are impressive, and it's no wonder why they're the top three in this class. Now, which is the one that's got the Travis, I think, has had a little bit of problem
Fumbling.
holding on to the football a little bit there. Not massive, but I mean, it is there on his tape more so than what I've seen with Javonte and Najee Harris there. So all three of them are impressive. And I at this point, I will tell you this. I think one of the three are going to be members of the Steelers.
That's a fair point and fair prediction, I think. Last question here will go from Mike Adesso. Do you think the NFL would ever stop teams from creating these crazy contracts with all these voidable years? Do you think the league would ever intervene at any point, Dave?
I don't know how much more they're going. Normally, you don't have to abuse it like this, and I think the NFLPA says who gives a you know what. Just let the team spend the money. You know, whatever it takes. Where would the biggest pushback come from anyway? If teams weren't spending the money, I guess that'd be one thing. But at least teams are spending the money here. Look, I don't think what they did with who's the New Orleans quarterback, no, the one they just added a four.
Taysom Hill and his $140 million.
Well, there's no reason to put those kind of salaries in that thing. I mean, if you're gonna do it that way, do it the way the Steelers did, and just put all minimum salaries in there. You try. Why? I don't. Are they trying to be cute or what? Are they trying to influence the quarterback number or what? I mean, now that I don't think if you're gonna here's what the rule should be. If you're gonna put voidable years in there, they have to be minimum salaries. How about that?
That would basically stop teams from doing that in the first place.
Well, no, it'll stop them from putting in these inflate. You could still still add the 4 voidable years, but I mean, if they're going to void, they're going to void. Don't impact the franchise tag number or anything along those lines. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I don't know if the league would step in, and I understand this year's kind of weird, but will teams start to use this as precedent going forward because it is a really creative way to create cap space if you need it, even in normal circumstances. So I wonder if teams will start to lean on this now because they realize, hey, this thing actually works pretty well for us, at least in the short term.
Well, if a player if a player knows it's going to keep his job and he's still going to get his money, but he's still going to become a free agent, a lot of them would do it. Now, it would be, if you went to Joe Hayden right now, what would Joe Hayden's reaction be to, we want you to add, 2 or 3 dummy years that are going to void, which basically we want you to do this. We don't want you to take any new money. We're going to give you what's owed to you, the $7 million, we just want you to add on these dummy years. And then, by the way, they're going to void. So this is going to be your last year. That's a tough conversation to have with a veteran player,
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a good question. We'll see going forward. Just last bit of semi-Steelers news. Tyler Cabbage getting a 1-year extension from the Buffalo Bills.
Wow,
so it's good for Dirty Red. And Trey had mentioned about rumors of DJ Chark going to Baltimore for Orlando Brown Jr. Yeah, I saw that guy. Then he started fighting with the owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars about it. So I'm not sure how much to take that as gospel. It doesn't sound like that's actually going to happen there, Trey. So that is going to wrap up today's stream. We'll be back in 2 weeks post free agency to talk about everything the Steelers did and more likely did not do in free agency, but we'll have a lot of content on SteelersDepot.com on the podcast tomorrow morning / afternoon and on my YouTube channel as well. So thank you guys so much for being here. I think maybe a record turnout tonight, so that was absolutely awesome to see. You guys are great questions. Thank you so much for being here. And Dave, Brian, as always, thank you for being here as well.
Yeah, thank you everybody for tuning in tonight. Peace and love to all of you. Stay safe. Thank you.
All right, guys, we will talk to you soon. Enjoy free agency, and certainly we'll be covering it over on Steelers Depot from every single angle. Have a good night, guys.